Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first video for Chapter 19, The Evolution of Vertebrate Diversity. When we are addressing vertebrates, let's first get started with what group they actually all belong to evolutionarily. All vertebrates belong to a taxa called chordates. We all belong to chordata. It is a phylum, for those of you following along taxonomically, but not all chordates are in fact vertebrates. A chordate is specifically designated, it's defined by specific traits that we all share in common. These include things like a notochord. A notochord is something that only exists in the embryonic stage of some chordates, but some few chordates actually keep it their entire life long. And it's a fairly strong, flexible cord, which in some animals provides the main support for the body. These are typically very small, very evolutionarily old chordates, and we'll get into those. But in other more derived chordates that have changed more over evolutionary time, the notochord is one of the progenitors of the spinal cord and the spine. Other major characteristics that help define what a chordate is are the existence of gills, at the very least in the embryonic stage. Again, a lot of these things disappear in the adult in other more derived chordates. And other characteristics that tend to disappear as we evolutionarily move out of the water and onto land, things like a tail. Yep. By the way, we humans are chordates, and this means that at some point in your life, when you were an embryo, when you were developing, when you were not even yet a fetus, you had these same characteristics. Things like gills, a notochord, and even a tail. Kind of would have been cool if we'd been able to keep a couple of those things, wouldn't it? Oh well. We took a different evolutionary path. But let's get into some of our relatives. The oldest branches of chordata include the hagfishes and the lampreys. Now, as you can see, these are some pretty interesting life forms. Hagfish and lampreys live at the bottom of the ocean unless they're hooked on to another animal. These folks can be sort of parasitic, especially the lampreys. Look at this mouth. Those teeth are designed for boring into the side of another fish so they can siphon blood off the other fish and support themselves that way. Lampreys will even feed off of sharks if they can get a hold of them. One of the major characteristics that defines hagfish and lampreys is that although they have a mouth with a jaw, it's not a hinged jaw. It's not a jaw that can open and close. When we finally see a jaw that can open and close, we're looking at the next layer or two of chordate evolution. This is chondrichthyes, which is sharks and rays. First sign of a hinged jaw, but not working with a bony skeleton. These guys are chordates, but their skeleton isn't made of bone. It's made out of cartilage, the same thing that makes up the tip of your nose and the shape of your ears and that pads your joints, like in your knees, your hips, your wrists, your shoulders. Cartilage makes up their entire skeleton. They also have the first appearance of something called the lateral line system, which sharks, rays, and all other fish share. The lateral line system is a system of sensory organs that goes down either side of the animal's body, and it helps them to sense changes in water pressure on either side of the body, and this can help make them very sensitive to wave force, ocean currents, but also the changes in local water pressure as another animal swims past. Other groups of jawed fishes include Actinopterygii and Sarcopterygii. I know these are some mouthful terms, but take your time with them, all right? Chondrichthyes are our jawed fish that have skeletons made out of cartilage. Actinopterygii are our ray-finned fish, and this means that the bones that make up the fins, that help the direct fin movement, come right off the body. These are things like goldfish, balloonfish, flounder, salmon, trout. A lot of the classic fish that we tend to fish for and that we enjoy eating are primarily ray-finned fish. Famous tuna, prized for sushi, and maybe a little seared ahi tuna. They are delicious. These are also ray-finned fishes. A couple of the major adaptations that you will see in ray-finned fishes are swim bladders, which are pockets, they're specialized organs that hold buoyant gas, air, inside the fish's body. And this helps them to fine-tune how deep versus shallow they will float in the water. It helps them to fine-tune their buoyancy. You'll also see an operculum, which is a protective flap that covers the gills. It covers a chamber housing the gills, and that can help protect the sensitive gills inside. In fact, you can kind of see the operculum right here on this goldfish. When that flap opens so that the fish can pass water over the gills and pull oxygen out of the water, you can actually look inside from behind and see the gills. And if you ever go fishing, you'll get to see these gills in person. Sarcopterygii, another mouthful, I know, but take your time with it, are lobe-finned fishes. And this means that their skeleton is slightly different from ray-finned fishes. Where in ray-finned fishes, the bones that make up the fins come right off the body, Sarcopterygii are one step closer to actually growing legs. And there is a bone that sticks out off the body, and the bones that make up the fin come off of that. It's not a leg yet. It is still a fin. But it's one gradual evolutionary change closer to actually growing legs. A classic and actually evolutionary pretty famous example of a lobe-finned fish is the coelacanth. And this animal is a big deal because we have fossils of it. But we thought for many years that it surely was extinct until it was discovered again in waters off of South America only in the last 15 to 20 years. So as far as evolutionary discoveries go, rediscovering the coelacanth, discovering that it still exists and had not gone into extinction, is a huge deal. And this is a photo of a woman scuba diving off the coast of South America alongside a coelacanth, an honest-to-God living fossil. And as you can see, there are those fins that still show that one major bone coming off the body and all the little very fine bones that fill in the rest of the fin radiating off of that. So cool! It's older than the dinosaurs, and it's still here. That is an evolutionary lifestyle that's definitely still working. All right. So how does this happen? So actual identifiable four legs, the evolution of the tetrapod, which actually means four legs, tetrapod, identifiably evolved somewhere between these species we've just been looking at, sharks, ray-finned fishes, the coelacanth, some odd examples like lungfish and the tiktaalik, which is an extinct variety, and it evolved right in between the tiktaalik and amphibians. Now, the tiktaalik is an example of a transition stage of evolution. It fills in the gap between species that still show some trending toward the evolution of legs and identifiable four legs. We got a tetrapod, ladies and gentlemen. The tiktaalik was an evolutionary species that we find the fossils for up in Arctic Canada. And the name Tiktaalik is actually from the local Inuit tribes that live in the area where these fossils were found. It basically means large freshwater fish, which is more or less what this animal was. Uh, and the interesting thing here is in ray fin fishes, like I was just saying, the bones that make up the fin come right off the body. In lobe-finned fishes, like the coelacanth we were just looking at, there's this bone right here in pink that comes off the body, and the other bones that fill in the rest of the fin are attached to it. They grow off of it. See here how in the Tiktaalik, these bones are gradually becoming more developed. This bone that comes off the body is getting longer, denser, wider, stronger, and the other bones that grow off of it are becoming much larger. The joint surfaces are getting stronger to the point where they're starting to be able to actually physically push down and support the body's weight. This is one of the most important evolutionary advantages toward being able to colonize the land. See, animals in the water don't have to support their own body weight. This is why whales can be as big as whales are. They don't have to hold themselves up. They're buoyant. The water supports them. But in order to get on land, you have to literally pull your own weight, which means you need limbs that are capable of holding you up. Fins definitely don't have that ability. Feet do. And here we see in the Tiktaalik definite signs that this animal was at an evolutionary stage where it was beginning to be able to do that. The next time we find distinctive fossils from further on down this evolutionary pathway, we have legs. So the Tiktaalik helps fill in what the evolution towards legs actually looked like. So cool. So cool. The first identifiable tetrapods that we know that were able to colonize the land were amphibians. Their name, amphibian, comes from the Greek amphibios, which means double life. The same way that someone who's ambidextrous can use both hands. Ambi means both, or double. Dextro means hand, or agility. So amphibians can live a double life. They live on both land and water. But they definitely still rely on wet environments. There's no desert amphibian that can live without water as a crucial requirement for part of its reproduction and life cycle. These include things like toads, frogs, and salamanders, including really cute red-eyed tree frogs. Hi. Many different types of amphibians have poison glands in their skin because they don't have a whole lot of ways of defending themselves. These guys tend to be soft, delicate. They can swim well, but they're not fast on land. They can hop, and they're quick like that, but these are not running animals. And some species are so well adapted to protecting themselves with poison, that's what they're known for. Check out poison dart frogs in the Amazon basin. Really well known for them. The reason why they still rely so hard on water is they need to lay their eggs in water in order for the eggs to survive. When those eggs are fertilized and they eventually hatch, you end up with these itty-bitty little tailed swimming tadpoles that gradually need to metamorphosize into adults. To metamorphosize means they need to drastically change their shape as they grow into adults. For one thing, they need to lose the tail in at least all frog and toad species. And even if they keep the tail, as salamanders do, they need to be growing some legs. Otherwise, the whole terrestrial part of their life cycle will never happen. The next set of tetrapods that is even better adapted toward living on land is the reptiles. Most reptile species live solely on land, although we do have freshwater and marine species. These are turtles, things like sea turtles or the turtles you'll find in lakes and ponds. But even then, they can get out and survive on land, and they frequently do for reproduction. They will lay their eggs in nests that they dig into the beach or the lake bank. The major adaptation that we see that is so crucial toward their surviving on land is actually part of this egg-laying process. This is the first appearance of what we know to be the amniotic egg. These are amniotes. Other amniotes include mammals and birds. What makes an amniote is some changes to its egg. The egg has a shell that's strong enough to protect the animal inside, and we see this best in reptiles and birds. Mammals sort of take one step back, most of them. But what really makes an amniotic egg amniotic is the presence of the amnion, which is a name for a particular extra kind of tissue inside the egg. It's not part of the embryo, but it surrounds the embryo and includes things like the yolk sac, which provides food. It's fat rich, it's protein rich, and it provides food to the embryonic animal that is growing and developing inside the egg. This extra food allows the embryonic animal to survive longer inside the egg, so that when it eventually hatches, it's better developed, it's stronger, it's larger, and this means that it's better able to protect itself on land. It can move faster, it will be further along in its development, so it's stronger, less likely to starve or dehydrate. It's all because it got some extra food while it was growing. Other adaptations that make reptiles better suited towards solely living on land than any fish or amphibians is the presence of scales, which help defend the body from too much heat or dehydration, and it's also a layer of physical protection. Some armor, all right? Some specialized scales we'll see in reptiles include the shells of turtles and tortoises. These are actually part of their skeleton, and they are very thick, very strong, and provide a lot of protection. Reptiles are also known colloquially as cold-blooded. This just means that they are ectothermic. What ectothermic means is that they do not produce body heat in order to maintain their own body heat relative to the temperature outside. What it means is that when it's very cold, eventually even the temperature inside the animal's body will start to cool down, and they may go into torpor. They may fall asleep, they may become very lazy and not move around a lot. If it gets cold enough, it will kill them. So most reptiles tend to survive best in warm areas where it better suits their survival inside their bodies. We start to get endotherms, which do control their interior body temperature and can survive better in cold areas in birds. There are no purely aquatic birds. There are no birds that spend most of their life in water. This is the first stage where we see tetrapods that are completely terrestrial. They may live on the water, things like pelicans or seagulls, but they don't spend most of their life in water in any case. Even reptiles have some species that spend most of their life in water. Again, things like sea turtles. No, instead, birds are completely adapted for a very different lifestyle. This is flight. This is true flight. And a whole bunch of adaptations for true flight. They have feathers that help support their body in the air and create a larger surface area to help them fly. Feathers are actually a modified type of scale. So there are things like Archaeopteryx, which is a classic fossil that shows us the transition from reptiles to birds. Birds also have bones that are specially adapted for flying. Many of their joints are fused to better support their bodies while they're taking off or landing and absorb that impact. But many of their other bones are also hollow to make the body lighter and easier to support in flight. They have bills and no teeth. Bills are beaks, but no teeth. Again, they are warm-blooded. They are endotherms, so they devote a lot of energy to maintaining their body temperature. They have excellent eyesight, and they show a lot of complex behaviors, many of which have to do with courtship, getting a mate, or with finding food. And as you can see, even in these few pictures, there's a lot of adaptations toward traveling, flying, finding food, or courtship. This honey creeper, for instance, those bright colors help attract other mates. Over here on this crow, however, we've got a very different evolutionary lifestyle. And instead of going for really bright colors and looking like a hippie, this crow relies on behavioral traits towards attracting a mate. All right. The most derived has changed the most since our common chordate ancestor, a group of all chordates, are the mammals. This includes us and all of our closest evolutionary relatives and a few others besides. Mammals have hair or fur. We use milk. We feed our young on that milk, our offspring. Most of us even give live birth. Most, like these tigers, humans, dogs, cats, horses, elk, you name it, are eutherians, meaning we have a placenta inside the female body that helps support the fetus and help provide it with food, with nutrition, while the fetus is growing until it is large enough and strong enough and well developed enough to be ready to be born. Not all mammals do quite this, however. Monotremes are a real weird exception, and there are not many monotremes. Monotremes are mammals that still lay eggs. They still share that amniotic egg, even with the waterproof shell, in common with reptiles. Now, even mammals that have a placenta are still amniotes because of the extra tissues that surround our embryos while they're developing. But monotremes are kind of a throwback. They still survive, though, things like the duck-billed platypus or this short-billed echidna lay eggs which hatch. But even these monotremes still feed their brand new hatched young on milk from the female's body. Another sort of unusual example of the mammal is the marsupial. They don't lay eggs. They are placental mammals, but the young is barely a fetus when it's technically born. It's just that it doesn't completely leave the female's body. Marsupials are all of our mammals that have a pouch on the front of the female's body. And when the fetus is technically born and it leaves the female's uterus, it doesn't completely leave her body. It will finish the rest of its growing and development safe, snugged in against her body, living in that pouch, where there is access to milk inside the pouch. There's nipples inside the pouch. And as you can see, this is a southern red kangaroo from Australia with her joey. This is the term for a baby kangaroo, for a juvenile kangaroo. And the joey is so small that he's still living inside her pouch. As the joey feeds more on milk and gets bigger and stronger, eventually he'll be in and out of her pouch all the time, which must be exhausting. But eventually he'll be strong enough and big enough that he won't be feeding on milk anymore. He'll be grazing like she does, and he will have completely and permanently left living in Mama's pouch. All right, folks, we're going to pick up with the rest of vertebrate evolution in the second half of Chapter 19. So I'll see you next time. Bye, folks.